Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you all had a fantastic Christmas and you're all looking forward to New Year. Actually, when this video goes up, it will be New Year's Eve, so I hope you have a wonderful evening tonight. Anyway, to get on to the video, I wanted to do something a little bit different for my channel today. And as you guys may know, if you follow my Instagram, which I'll leave down below, I've been reading lots and lots of books lately. I've always been really into reading, but I've been a lot less consistent in the past with my reading. But lately I have been reading book after book after book and absolutely loving it. I've really found my passion for it again, and I'm really excited about that. So I think I've read about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 books in the last month or so. So I'm getting through them at quite a rate of knots at the moment, which has been really lovely, and I've really been enjoying it. And I put on my Insta stories a little vote whether any of you guys would like to see book reviews on my channel. I was originally going to do it on my blog, but I think I would have way too much to say to write down, and I find it a lot more easier just to talk about it, because then like when ideas pop in my head I can just say them and not have to put them in like a proper way of what am I trying to say? See, this is why I have problems. Anyway, I thought it would be much better as a video, so that is what I'm going to do. And the book we are starting with in today's review is Normal People by Sally Rooney. Now, you may have seen this book in lots of places recently. It was longlisted for the Man Booker Prize this year, and also I think it won the Waterstones Book of the Year, which was really quite amazing. And Sally Rooney, the writer, also won the Best Young Writer of the Year. So really this has been a groundbreaking book, and her previous book, this is her second novel, I've also read, and that will be coming up in a review as well. But I'm going to talk about this one first, even though they came out the opposite way round, because I read them the wrong way round, but they're not linked, so it doesn't matter what way round you read them. But I read this book first, so I wanted to talk about this one first. So, Normal People. I also have another I have my notebook with loads and loads of notes in. I think I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 pages of notes, so I'm going to just keep this here to remind me of all the things that I wanted to talk about. So my overall points, I'll read what I wrote because it's just a bit easier. My overall points, it's set over 5 years, and it follows the relationship between Mary Ann and Connell, who are about, I think when the book starts, I think they're like 16 or 17, and by the end of it they're getting on for like 22-ish. So it covers lots of themes. So the themes that I wanted to talk about mainly, I kind of wanted to give you like a little bit of a trigger warning perhaps, because there are themes of domestic violence, there's themes of sex and mental health throughout this book. So if you are a younger viewer that you thought you might want to read this, perhaps ask a parent, and also if you are of age to read this book, then that's fine, but just keep that in mind, because I found this book quite emotional to read. So if any of those things are close to your heart, then that might trigger something in you, but obviously just keep an open mind and you should be fine. So I'm just gonna like read out the points that I wrote down and then sort of answer them more fully. So I wrote short sentences that still manage to have so much description and portray so much emotion. And what I mean by that is the prose that the book is written in, I found really interesting. It's not from any of the characters, it's not written in first person, it's not from any of the characters' point of view, it's narrated, and it's almost a running commentary of everything that they're doing, like literally to the point where it's like if a character picks up a mug and puts it back down again, Sally writes that down, which I found really interesting. And it was quite almost, I've not read something like that for a long time, because before this I read a Thomas Hardy book, who's my favourite author. But if you've ever read Thomas Hardy, it's very descriptive, but almost like over the top descriptive. Like he can write a chapter about a raindrop, whereas this was incredibly descriptive, but in such short bursts, which was really interesting. It was quite a contrast to what I've read before. I also wrote, I loved how their relationship was relatable, but you know it's very unhealthy. So throughout the book, Marianne and Connell have a very up and down relationship with each other. And when I say relationship, I don't mean that they were together. I just mean the relationship between the two of them. And you're reading it and it's very relatable. It's things that I have done in the past and stuff like that. So like, I think it brings up a lot of emotions, and I know a lot of people read this saying how relatable it was, and like looking back in hindsight and sort of thing. Way that it's relatable, you're reading it but you know it's incredibly unhealthy, and you're rooting for them to get together, but you also don't want them to, because they're quite destructive. Both the characters are quite destructive to themselves and to a lot of people around them, which I found really interesting to read about. And it was nice, not nice, but like it was different to read unhealthy relationship. The characters Marianne and Connell fail to communicate well with each other and miss subtle signals from each other often. I wrote that because throughout the book, like, I was realising that every time they tried to have a conversation, they would never get in the right end of the stick. Like, one of them misunderstood the other, and you're just reading it like, come on, get it together. Like, this is so silly. Both of you are being so silly. But it was just interesting to read, because in a way that's kind of how communication works. Like, a lot of the time you do misunderstand what people are saying, and then you think that person thinks a certain way of you when they don't, and stuff like that. So it was interesting because you're reading it as an outsider, but you know exactly what the characters felt like. Another point I wrote was, I found the book very relatable and almost nostalgic. I think that was because a lot of the themes running through I could relate to, and a lot of the situations that were happening I could relate to. Sally Rooney manages to really go into the depths of human relationships. She finds ways to drag you into daydreams with the characters, and then I've actually done a whole section on daydreams, so I'll go into that now. Somehow Sally manages to take you along the characters' daydreams with them. You'll be sat at a table with the other characters conversing, and suddenly be having a flashback, then back to the table. I felt this reflected the mentality of Connell and Marianne, and how they were always truly thinking about one another. Also how they never were really in the room, living in the moment, or always experienced dissociation. So what I mean by that is, this was probably my favourite part of the book, was you would be sitting, and I say that because when I'm reading a book I am there with the characters, like I proper get into it. So I would be sitting at the table with the characters and they're having a conversation, and Rooney starts to do this thing where you drift off into a daydream that either Marianne or Connell are having about the other, and then suddenly the daydream would end and it'll be, and we're back at the table. And I hadn't realised that we'd gone on the daydream, and I found that really quite amazing. I've never read a book that does that so well. Like, and then I would have to flick back through the pages and be like, what, hang on, when did we go? Like, we were at the table and I didn't even realise that we'd gone into this flashback. She did it so seamlessly that it was as if you were on the daydream with the character, which I just thought was really incredible. And like I said, I think it really says a lot about the mentality of both the characters, that they were never really paying any attention to what was happening right in front of them. They were always thinking about the other. And I think that... Sorry guys, my battery ran out, so I had to charge it, so I'm sorry if anything looks slightly different. But I was talking about daydreams in the book, and how you could be in a scene with the characters and suddenly you would be in one of their daydreams, and how Rooney wrote that, and it was really, really incredible actually. I thought it was really, really well written. The next thing I pointed out was that there are no quotation marks throughout the book. Something that originally annoyed me about the book was the fact that no quotation marks are used in the book to show when someone is speaking. At first I found it hard to tell if someone was being spoken, if something was being spoken, narrated, or a thought in the book. I soon started to interpret this as a form of showing the true human nature. You never know what someone is thinking, you never know if someone is speaking the truth. Yes, so throughout the book, Oh, there's a bit more. I also thought this linked back to the mental health theme running throughout the book. The dissociation and the daydreaming are all linked. The most interesting part about this is the book is written in third person, telling the story as it's happening. Yes, so there are no quotation marks throughout the whole book. So when someone is talking, you only really know that because afterwards it says he says or she says, so on. But as you're reading it, because the speech doesn't start with a quotation mark, sometimes I was reading things as if I was still narrating the story. And I found that quite interesting because sometimes I would read something and then realise it was something someone was saying, and I'd read it as a narrator, which is quite interesting because I just felt like you never really knew when someone was saying something, and I think that led to a lot of the miscommunications between Connell and Marianne, because when you're reading it, even when it's obvious when they're having a conversation because the sentences are directed to each other, you could tell they were talking. Because there were no quotation marks, some sentences seemed like a thought in the person's head, but I didn't know if they were being said aloud. Which for some people you might find that quite annoying, and certainly for the first couple of chapters I was like, oh, this is so frustrating because I don't know what's being said or what's being thought. But like I said, it does say says Marianne, but then the next line it doesn't say who spoke, so I don't know if that was Marianne or Connell's line. It's on the next line down, so I assume it's a different person, but it's not always obvious. You get used to it throughout the book. As you read more and more, you do get used to it. But yeah, I just thought it was an interesting point because I don't think I've ever read a book that didn't use quotation marks. And Conversations with Friends, which is the first novel Sally Rooney wrote, doesn't have quotation marks either. I don't know if that's a common thing, if that's a type of prose or anything. All the books that I've read use quotation marks, so I just found that quite interesting. The next, and this is the final bit that I wrote about, was about description. The description in this book is so pure and simple and yet so emotive, it's incredible. Compared to Hardy, oh yeah, I was going to compare it to Hardy. So like I said before, Thomas Hardy is my favourite author, but he can literally make a whole chapter about a raindrop falling or a river flowing, and it's incredible and it's overly descriptive. He describes everything that's happening in that scene. A lot of the things that he describes are to do with nature as well. But in this book, everything was so descriptive. Like, I felt like I was completely in the scene. Like I said, like every little thing that everyone did, the way someone spoke, the hand gestures they were using was all written down in very short bursts, like short sentences. I wanted to try and find an example of you, and an example for you, excuse me. But as I was reading it, I didn't want to keep making notes because it then becomes a bit of a job to read the book. So I read the book in full and then wrote the notes afterwards. And I did think to myself, oh, should I write the notes as I'm reading so that I can sort of put tabs where the things that I'm talking about are, and then I can read you an extract from the book. But then it stops me reading it fully, and I would have to keep stopping and starting, and I don't think you would actually get the best review, so I didn't do that. But I wish I could find you a place now. I don't think I'm going to be able to sit here and find an example of that, but it was just really, really interesting. Simple descriptions such as she picks up her glass of wine, it almost doesn't need to be said, but in doing so it adds to the atmosphere. And yeah, that happened a lot. So there were things like she licked her lips, Connell tapped his fingers on the desk, things that don't particularly need to be said. Like, it doesn't particularly add to the story in any way, but through doing that and through adding in those little details, you get much more of a sense of the scene and what is happening between the two people. And of course those things happen when you're having a conversation with someone. You might put your hair behind your ear. It doesn't mean anything to the conversation as such. Perhaps it's a body language thing maybe, but I just thought it added so much more to the scene, and it was a really interesting way of doing that. So yes, those are all my points on Normal People. Overall, I thought it was a fantastic book. I read it in 4 days. I couldn't put it down. I was working over those 4 days that I was reading. If it had been a weekend, I probably would have read it in 1 day, if not 2. But it was because I was working that it took 4 days to read, because obviously it's not a very big book. But completely recommend it. I would probably give this book 8 out of 10 maybe. Any negatives? The only things I could think about, I watched Sunbeam's Jess. I don't know if you guys watch her on YouTube. She's fantastic. She does book reviews as well, and she said about this book that she thought the difference in their hierarchy, so that Connell's very poor and Marianne's family are very rich, that wasn't expanded enough, which I do agree with, but I feel that the reason why that wasn't expanded was because it just didn't need to be. Like to Connell and Marianne, it didn't matter that Connell's family didn't have a lot of money, and it didn't matter that Marianne's family had a lot of money. So it was an interesting point. Yes, it wasn't really expanded throughout the book. It didn't really come up too much, only in a very jokey way. But I don't feel like it really needed to be expanded, because I think that was kind of a metaphor for the fact that it didn't matter to either of them where they came from. So that's the only thing I can think about. Also, the fact that there are lots of themes running through this that are perhaps not very nice themes. There is domestic abuse. There is like lots of talk about mental health and depression. There is lots of not terrible sex scenes, but just you know, unhealthy sex scenes perhaps. But I don't feel like they were put in the book to make you cry or to make you feel sorry for the character in a sense. Like, they were needed in the book, and I hate it when you're reading about a character and it's like, oh, she's so depressed and she likes this during sex because she's just so depressed and all of this. If the character needs that, if the author gives that to a character to give the character substance, then that doesn't sit well with me, because you shouldn't have to make your character this tragic case to give the character any substance. These characters had substance and they had other issues, which is a good thing to me, because I just don't like it when authors use mental health as like the substance for the character. Like, all the person is depressed and that's who they are as a person, because depression is not who you are as a person, it's something that you have, but you are your own person as well. And in this book, both Connell and Marianne go through things like that, but they have their own personalities. That the depression was not their personality, which I thought was good and a good way of writing about depression. So that was something I picked up on. I don't feel like the mental health themes running through the book were used to make you feel upset, or used to make you cry, or used to make you like the character more or feel sorry for the character. They were just something that happened to the character, but the character had enough substance and personality for you to like them aside of that anyway. So that was good. But yes, overall I really enjoyed the book, and like I said, I've now read Conversations with Friends, and there will be a review on that book too. Overall, Sally Rooney as a writer has honestly probably become one of my top 5 authors that I've read. I think these books were brilliantly written. They were funny, they were sad, they made me laugh at times, they made me cry. There was so much in between as well. I was angry at the characters, like, how can you keep doing this to yourself, and felt lots of emotions reading them, and that's a sign of a really, really good book. So yes, really recommend reading this book. Let me know if you've read it already, because I would love to hear your guys' opinions on what you thought of the book as well, and let me know if you're planning on reading it too. Thanks so much for watching, guys. I will try and do more of these book reviews. At the moment I'm reading Eleanor Oliphant is Completely Fine. It's such a long title for a book, it really annoys me, but that's what I'm reading at the moment, so there'll probably be a review on that coming up soon. And my next books to read are, I've got another Thomas Hardy book called Two on a Tower, and after that I'm going to be reading The Great Gatsby by Scott F. Fitzgerald, which I've been trying to read for years. but never got round to it, and I'm gonna actually give it a proper go this time. So yes, thank you so much for watching, guys. Please do give this video a like if you enjoyed it and you want to see more book reviews from me, and don't forget to subscribe if you want to see videos from me every Monday at 6 PM, and do go check out my blog rayofstyle.co.uk, which is having a relaunch soon, guys. I've got it in the process. I'm relaunching my blog. It's going to look amazing. I'm so excited about it, and I've got some really exciting projects coming up in 2019, so do go check it out. Thanks so much for watching, guys, and I will see you in the next one. Bye. There's too much noise around.